Hello everyone, hope you're all doing well on this beautiful, it's midnight right now and I'm trying to get my papers together. I just finished the video for the other class, now I'm trying to do a video for y'all. These videos apparently have been very helpful and I have received many emails uh, about them and about how helpful they have been. And I think this is something that I started doing this semester. Actually, didn't think it was gonna be this successful, but you all have really liked it, and I've been getting numerous emails about them and how it has helped you and guided you as far as what objectives and what areas you need to focus on for the exam. Uh, okay, let's talk about the exam method. So, this is our final lecture exam review for BSCI 117 Human Biology course, fall of 2020. Today is Tuesday, 12:15 a.m., December 8th. As I'm videotaping this, as soon as this is finished, I will upload it to YouTube, and the exam is already ready. As soon as it's uploaded to YouTube, I will post a link and it will be available to you with the exam at the same time in about hour or two. Uh, the final exam is cumulative. It is cumulative. I know it's going to be a lot of materials. However, when I say a cumulative final exam, uh, I will be asking very generalized questions and not nitpicky, detailed questions that you don't necessarily need to know in order to take the next class, or in order to go take an exam, entrance exam, or take another upper level biology course. It's going to be focused on the main objectives and the main essential topics that we have covered. I believe it's very evenly divided, with most questions, about 18% of the questions being from heart, uh, blood vessels, and blood. When I go over reviewing those questions only from that section, heart, blood vessels, and blood, I will not go over the pages or sections because I believe you would already be familiar with a lot of them. And even though they are not repeat questions, but in a way or a form, they are asking about the same concept. And I will go over what like if it's neutrophils and there's a question about neutrophils. I want you to know the function of neutrophils, or what they look like, if they have a nucleus or not. But I won't tell you which section, or I will not refer you to a section. That's only for the heart, blood vessels, and blood, because I think by now you should have a very good understanding from that area with the lecture exams that you have taken and the lab exam and the lab quizzes and the homework assignments from those sections. The rest, I will give you the sections and I will refer you to pages and tables. So 18% is heart, blood vessels, and blood. 17% is the nervous system, and those are the major ones, and the rest is about 8%, 10%, 6%. There are a total of 60 60 questions, 59 are multiple choice. one is matching. There are no bonus questions, there is not going to be a final exam extra credit assignment either. So no bonus questions and no final exam extra credit assignment. Your grade will be your grade after you take the exam. It probably won't get adjusted either. So the exam, I'm going to give you 300 minutes to complete the exam. You will be only having one attempt to take the exam. 300 minutes for 60 questions, that's plenty of time. I believe the exam is fairly easy. That's why I don't. I think the class average is gonna be. It's gonna be above average. If it's not, then I will curve the grades. Uh, However, because I have to submit the official final grades to the registrar's office on Monday, December 14, I cannot. A lot of students wait until last minute, and I won't be able to get a good look or a good basically estimate of the average of the class average, and mainly because I won't have enough students having turned in the exam to calculate that. So that's why I said the exam is fairly easy and there are no bonus questions, no extra credit assignments for it, and your grade will be your grade right after you submit the exam, most likely, more than likely. That being the case, the exam is due by Sunday, December 13 at 11:59 p.m. And as I said, I have to submit your final official grades to the registrar's office the next day on Monday, December 14 by 12 p.m. So if by Sunday night, Sunday, December 13 at 11:59 p.m., I will go over my grade book and I will look at all the assignments. I will make sure they have all been put in from my side. They've all been graded and the scores are correct. Uh, if there is any missing assignments and you haven't communicated to me about them, and already a lot of times I have already communicated to you about your missing assignments, and from those who I have not heard from, and you do not submit it by Sunday, December 13 at 11:59, you will get a 0 on that assignment, and that will definitely affect your score. Grades are either A, B, C, D, and F. There is a grade of I as well that has to be in a situational, in a specific situation where both a student and the instructor have to be in mutual agreement for an I grade, and then I have to submit a form to the school saying that the student has completed 40% of the course materials, and because of certain situations, specific situations, of course they won't accept every situation. The student was not able to complete the rest of the assignments, but at least 40%, 40% of it has to be completed. But that's not something that's very common. And I don't expect anyone to get an F or even a D, because you all have been so great this term. Uh, Smart, very smart, intelligent, highly intelligent group of students we got here. Uh, I will email you as soon as you submit your final exam. And if you already have all your assignments in and you submit your final exam, I will email you your final grade ahead of time. So let's say tomorrow you take the exam, you have taken all the assignments, you have finished them all, you have finished the lab exam, you have finished all the lab quizzes, everything's done. I will go ahead and send you a final email with your final grade. How the course is divided, two sections. Of course, as you know by now, the first section is our lecture, 700 points. The other section is the lab section, 300 points. You would take the total points from the lecture and add it to the total points that you get from the lab section. A perfect scenario would be 700 plus 300, which would be 1,000. And we multiply that by 0.1, which would be 100%. However, let's say in the lecture, after you took the final exam, you have a total of 600 points. And in the lab section, after you have taken all the lab exam and all the lab quizzes, you have a total of 280. Take those numbers, add them together, you'll get 880. Either multiply 880 by 0.1, you'll get 88%, which is a B, or take 880 divided by 1,000 and multiplied by 100, you will get 88% again. If you get 88.5, that's automatically an A. If you get if you get 89.5, that's automatically an A. If you get 89.4, that's a B. If you get 79.5, that's a B. If you get 79.4, that's a C. The final exam is worth 180 points, guys. So it's very important. Let's get started. Okay. I'm going to be looking at the exam at the same time. Try to pull it up. Okay. First and foremost, I want you to be familiar with the ovarian cycle. Very important. We are starting with the reproductive system. Ovarian cycle, specifically hormonal regulation of ovarian cycle. Read the step-by-step description on page 22 of reproductive supplemental notes. It has a step-by-step description. Read the whole page 22 of reproductive supplemental notes. And definitely know what is responsible for ovulation. What is responsible for ovulation? And you should already know that. That's a surge in LH. For that, I would refer you to page 13 of reproductive system lecture notes, section 23.29. Next is a question about a sperm pathway in male reproductive system, or in another word is also called duct system pathway. That pathway has been drawn into a chart, and I would refer you to look at that chart and look at that diagram on page 4 of reproductive system supplemental notes. So there is a question where I'm asking you to put them in order. The next question is about the function of ovaries. Function of ovaries. What hormones do they manufacture and release? For that, I would refer you to page 20 of reproductive system supplemental notes under the section of function, under the function section. Definitely know which part of the ovary releases progesterone. Let me see. Definitely know what is the hormone that is primarily produced by corpus luteum, and that's again on that page, uh, page 20 of reproductive system supplemental notes under the function section. And that's basically the hormones that are manufactured and released by the ovaries. One part being the corpus luteum, and what does corpus luteum release. Okay, so that's all for the reproductive system. Next, we are gonna go to let me see. Okay, there are very few questions on the special senses. I want a special senses. I want you to know the distribution of rods and cones in the eye. Specifically know which areas of the retina they are distributed in. For that, I would refer you to a special senses lecture notes, page 7, section 12.13. Also, on a special senses lecture notes, page 5, objective E, on starting with the paragraph interna tunica. Read the paragraph about the interna tunica on page 5 under objective E of a special senses lecture notes. Also, page 7, section 12.13 of a special senses lecture notes. Next is a question about the fact that how is sound conveyed, how is sound sensation conveyed through the cochlear nerve to the brain. I would refer you to page 12 of a special senses lecture notes, section 12.18, and also read that section. Also, I want you to know what are mechanoreceptors important for. They are important for hearing, balance, touch, and senses. For that, I will refer you to page 1 of a special senses lecture notes, section 12.1. So basically, if I give you a question, if I give you a question and ask you, uh, give you a, give you the events, uh, and ask you based on these events that I'm describing, uh, what is this event based on? What sense is it based on? Is it taste, smell, hearing, or vision? I mean, the explanation is going to be very clear if you read the sections that I told you about. You would immediately know if it's taste, smell, hearing, or vision based on the events that I have explained in the question. Uh, Next is I want you to know what auditory tube is. For that, I would refer you to page 11 of a special senses. Second paragraph, auditory tube. Auditory tube. What does auditory tube do in the middle ear? Remember, it's very important. It's the structure that allows the air pressure to equalize. So that's the main thing that I want you to get out of it. Auditory tube, It's the main structure. It's a structure that allows the air pressure to equalize in the middle ear. Okay, so that's the questions on, those are the questions on special senses. We went over the reproductive. Let's go through the urinary. I want you to know we have already gone over these major substances that are reabsorbed by the nephron. So, what should you not see in the urine, basically? And this was a homework question. So, if you answered it in the homework question, you should be able to get it on the exam as well. Usually, proteins don't pass. Neither do red blood cells, white blood cells, glucose doesn't pass, nitrogenous waste do pass. So for that, I would refer you to page 12 of urinary system supplemental notes under the section of reabsorption by nephron region. Next, most important questions that has to always be asked in urinary system physiology is mechanism and function of aldosterone and antidiuretic hormone. I'm gonna give you an explanation. Basically, a lot of you got this question wrong on the homework assignments, and this was the homework assignment for 5 was the only homework assignment that had a very low average as compared to the other homework assignments. So remember, aldosterone, what does aldosterone do? Aldosterone is released when blood pressure is low, of course. But its main function when aldosterone is released, it increases sodium reabsorption. So it holds on to the sodium. So the sodium is not going to be excreted in the urine. And if you remember with osmosis, when we talked about how water follows sodium, so always remember, this is basic in physiology. Water follows salt. Water follows sodium. So when aldosterone, it increases sodium reabsorption, so you're going to be increasing the blood sodium level or body sodium level, but at the same time, water is following as well. So that way you can increase the blood pressure, and when the blood pressure is low, because now you have water following the sodium, but your sodium level is also going to be increased. So with that question that I had, Jimmy eating salty popcorn, which one was more appropriate was antidiuretic hormone. With antidiuretic hormone, the only thing that happens when it's released is water is reabsorbed from collecting tubules. Remember, it's important where it's absorbed from. Collecting tubules. There is no sodium absorption. With antidiuretic hormone, there is only water absorption from collecting tubules. So you don't have to worry about the sodium aspect of it. If the person, like Jimmy, who had already eaten a lot of salty popcorn and has a high level of sodium, why would you want to administer aldosterone, where it would even give them further sodium, and more sodium adds onto the sodium, and that's hypernatremia, which is not a good thing. So for that, I would refer you to page 12 of urinary system supplemental notes under reabsorption by no, that was the wrong one. That was the substances that was reabsorbed by nephron. For this, for the aldosterone and antidiuretic hormone mechanism, I would refer you to page 15 of urinary system supplemental notes, figure 22.2. It's a beautiful figure. Look at it, page 15 of urinary supplemental notes, page 22. Figure 22.2. Next is basically the steps, or how does antidiuretic hormone conserves water. For that, I would refer you to page 20 of urinary supplemental notes. Read the whole page. Next is renin-angiotensin aldosterone system, or for short, RAAS system, RAS system. Uh, it's very simple. It's a very simple system. When blood pressure falls, uh, renin is released and it converts angiotensinogen to angiotensin 1, and angiotensin 1 gets converted to angiotensin 2, and you have vasoconstriction of blood vessels. So if you have vasoconstriction of blood vessels, blood pressure goes up. At the same time, aldosterone is released, and you have absorption of sodium and water. So that's how uh, during trauma, uh, if you lose a lot of fluid and your blood pressure falls, this is the system that kicks in. ROS, renin, angiotensin, aldosterone. Renin, what does it do? Converts angiotensinogen to aldosterone to angiotensin 1. Angiotensin 1 gets converted to angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 constricts the blood vessel. And then we have the aldosterone, which reabsorbs the sodium from the kidney, so you do not have any sodium excretion, and water follows sodium. That way, your blood pressure would go up. So for that, I would refer you to page 26 of urinary system supplemental notes. Read the whole page about ROS. I want you to be familiar with parts of nephron and correct order of how they are involved in urine formation. So the correct order of how they are involved in urine formation, the parts of nephron, the where it starts from, distal tubules, and the loop of Henle, ascending, descending, uh, and all of that. It's going to be putting them in order. For that, I would definitely refer you to page 6 of urinary system supplemental notes under the description section. Okay, that's it for the urinary. Let's go to respiratory. Uh, Again, this is a repeat question again. I want you to be in not a repeat question in a manner where I have copied and pasted the question, but the concept is the same. I want you to know the steps in normal inhalation. I would refer you to page 6 of respiratory system supplemental notes under mechanism of breathing section. Steps in normal inhalation. Steps in normal inhalation. And you should already know that based on the other questions that we have had. So page 6 of respiratory system supplemental notes, mechanism of breathing section. The next question is the route of airflow into the lungs. Again, you have to put them in order. Where does it start? Where does it go? And all the sections and segments that it goes through. The route of airflow into the lungs. There is a flow chart that's on page 4 of respiratory system supplemental notes. Be familiar with that flow chart, copy and paste it, learn it, memorize it, because the question that I'm asking is put them in order of as soon as when it gets when you inhale and the flow of it throughout the lungs. Next is how does the respiratory chemoreceptor operate? Very important question, because you have to understand this if you're going to go into the healthcare field. And if you're going to become a doctor, a nurse, a pharmacist, anything in healthcare field, and I'll tell you in a minute why, as to why you have to understand this, especially with the opioid crisis and how individuals overdose and they die because of respiratory depression. So basically, how the respiratory chemoreceptors operate, they are located in medulla oblongata. When they indicate, when they see that there is an increased level of carbon dioxide in the cerebrospinal fluid, or a decreased pH. You know what a decreased pH is. That means when we have a decreased pH, we have a lot of hydrogen ions. So increased hydrogen ions is same as decreased pH. So remember that. So when the medulla oblongata detects that there is a high level of carbon dioxide or a decrease in pH in cerebrospinal fluid, it increases respiration. So your respiration would go up. As far as opioids, a lot of times with fentanyl and opioids and benzos, when they get mixed, and let's say a person goes doctor shopping and they are already on anxiety medication, lorazepam, Xanax, diazepam, clonazepam, either one, and they take that, and the next minute they have pain, so they take a Percocet or oxycodone, and then because of a surgery that they had a long time ago, they have some morphine left over in their pill bottle, so they take one morphine on top of it, and then they have a little bit of muscle ache in the back, so they take a muscle relaxer too to calm the nerves. So now you are gonna run into major problems because the person has taken morphine, which is an opioid itself, oxycodone, which is more opioid itself, clonazepam, which is a benzodiazepine, which is a depressant, and a muscle relaxer like Flexeril, Soma, or something like that. And on top of that, they're like, I want to have a good evening and have a drink. So they drink a couple of beers and they call it a night. If they are by themselves, the unfortunate thing would be that they might overdose. And the overdose that happens is when they go to bed, they will not wake up because that chemoreceptor has been blocked. That chemoreceptor cannot detect, because of the opioids affect that chemoreceptors, right? So the chemoreceptor can no longer detect that you have not been breathing very well and carbon dioxide is building up in your system, your pH is going down. So it cannot send a signal to your brain to increase breathing, to, hey, you need to breathe. It cannot do that anymore because it cannot detect the carbon dioxide level in your body. It has been blocked. So guess what? When that doesn't happen and you're not receiving that signal, your body is not gonna breathe more rapidly, and the breathing rate might even further slow down. Carbon dioxide is going to build up to a point where breathing's going to stop and the person is going to die of opioid overdose due to respiratory depression. That's the only reason heroin overdose, fentanyl overdose, any of the a combination of opioid, benzos, muscle relaxers, alcohol caused it because of respiratory depression that that causes them to die. Nothing else. With cocaine and stimulants, it can be a myocardial infarction. But with opioids, because they are depressants and they are not uppers, that's the reason that the person passes away. So that's why I wanted you to be familiar with that. I think I mentioned the page that you have to go to read about this, page 10 of Respiratory System Lecture Notes, section 18.26. Next question, I want you to be familiar with the function of cilia in the lungs. I'm not going to give you the section, just going to give you the answer. The function of cilia in the lungs is basically to move the mucus out of the bronchial tree. Okay, quickly let's go through the blood vessel and the heart. Easy questions. You have seen them before. You have seen the concept. So, what is the site of red blood cell production in adults? Off the top of your head, everyone say with me. What is the site of red blood cell production in adults? Red bone marrow. What is plasma called? What is plasma without clotting factors called? This is, I'm changing the question, but you answered this question already on the exam and the lab quiz. Remember the sequence of the steps that led to conversion of fibrinogen to fibrin? That huge step, the external and the internal. I'm not going to ask you any question on those, but I do want you to know what that sequence is called that leads to fibrinogen being converted to fibrin. What is that cascade? What is that sequence called? Okay, it's a very easy term. It's basically called the clotting sequence or the clotting cascade. I want you to be familiar with the function and the structure of neutrophils. Neutrophils are white blood cells. I want you to know what are formed elements. I want you to know what provides blood supply to muscle of the heart. What circulation? Basically, blood supply to the muscles of the heart is produced by what circulation? A lot of you got this question, was a homework question. A lot of you got it wrong and you had put aorta or something else. However, I'm asking, you have the heart. The heart needs its own blood supply. So what circulation gives the heart the blood supply that it needs? And is it the systemic circulation? Is it the pulmonary circulation? Or is it the coronary circulation? It's the coronary circulation, by the way. That specific question that I had asked was the circumflex artery, which is part of the coronary circulation. There is a question on ECG. Very simple. I want you to know what QRS means and when is it produced. So that's blood, heart, and blood vessels. Now let's go over the nervous system. Always have to ask this, very important. I want you to be familiar with the nervous impulse conduction. I want you to know the steps, resting potential, depolarization, and repolarization. At resting potential, inside of the cell is negative, usually negative 70. Outside is positive. How is this potential maintained? That you have the negative 70 and the positive outside. It's maintained, the resting membrane potential is maintained by sodium potassium pump. So remember that. Then we have depolarization where voltage gated sodium channel opens, and when that channel opens, does sodium go inside the cell or flow inside the cell from outside, or does it flow outside the cell from inside? Well, of course, it flows from the outside because there is more sodium in the outside. It flows to inside of the cell and causes depolarization. Remember, it happens through the voltage gated sodium channel. So the depolarization happens when sodium goes inside the cell through the voltage gated sodium channel. And then we have repolarization. That's when the voltage gated potassium channel opens and the potassium goes out of the cell. Because now during depolarization, with all the sodium that has come inside the cell and sodium being positive, it has made the cell positive. It's no longer negative 70. It got depolarized because of all the sodium that came in. Now it's positive. Now we want to take it back for it to become negative. So basically, voltage gated for repolarization to happen, voltage gated potassium channels open, and the potassium that's inside the cell, there is always more potassium inside the cell than outside the cell. There is more sodium outside the cell than inside the cell. So the potassium goes from inside the cell to the outside. Potassium is positive. When it goes from inside to the outside, you are creating a negative environment inside the cell. That's when repolarization happens, when the potassium goes outside the cell. It goes back to resting potential. Sometimes too much potassium goes outside of the cell. Too much potassium goes outside of the cell, and the cell, instead of being negative 70, becomes negative 80 or negative 90. That is called hyperpolarization. And then it normalizes itself, goes back to repolarization, goes back to resting membrane. For that, I would refer you to page 10 of Nervous System Supplemental Notes, Part 1. Read the whole page. Also, page 246 of Nervous System Text Reading, Part 1, under section Generation of Action Potential. Next, I want you to be familiar with three different types of neurons, specifically the multipolar ones. We have unipolar, bipolar, multipolar, the three types of neurons. For that, I would refer you to page 3 of Nervous System Lecture Notes, Part 1, Objective B, and also Section 9.4 right under Objective B. Read Objective B and then read Section 9.4. Basically, with multipolar neurons, there is one axon and two or more dendrites. Remember that. Multipolar, one axon, more than two or more dendrites. Okay, next question is about blood-brain barrier in the brain. There was a question again on that on the exam or one of the homework assignments. Know what can get through blood-brain barrier. One thing that I want you to know, brain is fat. Brain is fat and fatty tissues, and it's lipophilic. It's fatty. So anything that's fatty can get inside. Alcohol can get inside. Nicotine can get inside. There are other stuff that cannot get inside. I would refer you to page 11 of Nervous System Lecture Notes, Part 2. Page 11 of Nervous System Lecture Notes, Part 2, Objective J, and Section 10.29. Know what can get through blood-brain barrier and what cannot get through blood-brain barrier. Anesthetics can get through blood-brain barriers. However, a lot of other things cannot get through. Antibiotics cannot get through blood-brain barriers, uh, which is very important because sometimes when you have meningitis, then they have to give you a specific type of antibiotics, and it's very dangerous when infection gets to the brain, as you know. It's because a lot of the antibiotics that are out there will not penetrate the blood brain barrier. Okay, next I want you to know what is precentral gyrus and where is it located at. What is post-central gyrus and where is it located at? Because its holidays are coming up and it has been a tough year for all of us, 2020, and we are ready for it to be over. And I know a lot of you, we have all had our share of struggles this year with COVID, and times are difficult. So I would go ahead and uh, tell you, basically, explain to you uh, precentral gyrus. Precentral gyrus is located in the frontal lobe. So know that. That's the first thing, location. It's located in the prefrontal lobe. Basically, it's anterior to the central sulcus. It contains the primary motor area of cerebral cortex. So, what is it? It contains the primary motor area of cerebral cortex in the front and located in the frontal lobe. Post-central gyrus contains the primary somatosensory area of cerebral cortex and is located posterior to the central sulcus, so posterior lobe. Uh, so that's that. I want you to know the function of cerebellum. You should already know that the function of cerebellum. What is the function of cerebellum? Balance and motor coordination. If you didn't know that, I would be a little bit concerned. Uh, for that, I would refer you to page 10 of Nervous System Supplemental Notes, Part 2, under the description section. I want you to know the function of thalamus. Uh, Page 2 of Nervous System Lecture Notes, Part 2. Look at table 10.1. It has regions of the brain. It has thalamus there, and it has the function of thalamus. It also has cerebellum and the function of cerebellum. Page 2 of Nervous System Lecture Notes, Part 2, Table 1.1. Next is, of course, to ask this, sympathetic and parasympathetic stimulation. Sympathetic is fight or flight. Parasympathetic is rest and digest. Remember, sympathetic is adrenergic and cholinergic. Parasympathetic is cholinergic only. So, if I say which one is associated correctly with norepinephrine, would it be sympathetic or parasympathetic? That would be sympathetic because norepinephrine, epinephrine, they are adrenergic, and adrenergic is only associated with sympathetic. And sympathetic is fight or flight. Parasympathetic is rest and digest. Everything slows down basically, except the digestion. Uh, for that, I would refer you to nervous system lecture notes, part 2, pages 25 and 26, objective G, and also section 11.23, and also table 11.5. They all can be found on page 25 and 26 of Nervous System Lecture Notes Part 2. Okay, almost done. Muscular and skeletal. Uh, I want you to be familiar with actin and myosin. Which one is the thick filament? Myosin, thin filament, actin. I would refer you to page 2 of Muscular System Supplemental Notes. I want you to know which one includes the troponin and tropomyosin. That would an actin that would be the thin filament that includes all that. I want you to know which one has a myosin head, and I want you to also know which one has binding site for calcium. Binding site for calcium is on the thin filament or actin. I want you to know the muscle attachment sites. That's very important as well. Very general. There are two, the origin and insertion. Origin is a stationary, insertion is the movable one. For that, I would refer you to page 216 of Muscular System text reading under the section Origin, Insertion, and Action. Read that section. I want you to be familiar with fibula, page 23 of a Skeletal Muscle System lecture notes, section 6.41. I want you to be familiar with pelvis or pelvic girdle, page 20 of a Skeletal System lecture notes, objective L. I want you to know what bones make up the cranial bones, page 3 of a Skeletal System lecture notes, table 6.1. I want you to know the structure of a sternum, page 16 of a Skeletal System lecture notes, section 6.28, and that's the structure of a sternum. I want you to be familiar with the structure of a typical long bone, specifically epiphyseal plate and epiphyseal line. Page 6 of a Skeletal System lecture notes, objective F. Let's go to a skin now. I want you to be familiar with the sweat glands, specifically eccrine and apocrine sweat glands. Page 9 of Integumentary System Lecture Notes, section 5.27. Read about those two sweat glands, eccrine and apocrine. Skin color. Skin color, I would refer you to page 160 of Integumentary System text reading under the section The Structural Basis of a Skin Color. So, what causes the change in a skin color, basically? Or the differences in a skin color is due to what? Is due to amount of the melanin. What is melanin produced by? Melanocytes. However, don't get confused here. A lot of students miss questions because they get confused here and they pick the wrong answer. So as far as amount of melanin, different races, African Americans have more melanin as compared to other races. However, melanocyte, the cell that produces melanin, we all have the same number of melanocytes. All people, all races have the same number of melanocytes. Okay, I want you to be familiar with composition of epidermis, page 3 of integumentary system lecture notes, section 5.6. I want you to know the transport systems, active and passive, different kinds of active, different kinds of passive. Page 14 of cell supplemental notes, the whole page. I want you to know specifically which one requires energy. You should know that by now. You should know that right now. Uh, does osmosis require energy? Does facilitated diffusion require energy? Does passive diffusion require energy? So main one that requires energy is sodium potassium pump. I want you to know and be able to describe phospholipid. Page 4 of cell supplemental notes under the description section. Let's go to the tissues. I want you to be able to compare 3 types of muscle tissues: a smooth, cardiac, and a skeletal. For that, go to page 8 of tissue lecture notes, table 4.7. Lastly, I want you to know what organic compounds are and the major families of organic compounds. For that, I refer you to page 7 of chemistry lecture notes, section 2.16. Also know what homeostasis is. That's all, guys, that I have for now. Uh, Feel free to email me if you have any questions. I went through this real quick. There were a lot of questions. You might have to pause the video, go back as you're taking notes, and as I said, the sections and you're writing it down. Go back to those sections and study them. You should know by now how the process works. And feel free to take the exam whenever you feel ready, as long as it's before Friday, December 13, before Sunday, December 13, due date 11:59 p.m. And good luck, guys. Thank you.